Peter Dean is a fellow at the Strategic and Defence Studies Centre and the current Fulbright scholar in Australia-United States Alliance Studies. He joins us now from Washington. Peter, good to talk to you tonight. We saw the UN Security Council overnight was dominated by the coalition against IS militants. Let's firstly hear from Barack Obama.
The terrorist group known as ISIL must be degraded and ultimately destroyed. This group has terrorized all who they come across in Iraq and Syria. There can be no reasoning, no negotiation with this brand of evil. The only language understood by killers like this is the language of force. So the United States of America will work with a broad coalition to dismantle this network of death.
Peter, how easy is it going to be to dismantle IS, and is force the only way forward?
It's going to be very difficult to dismantle IS. As we've seen, for instance, with Al-Qaeda, there's been a long ongoing conflict with Al-Qaeda since September 11th, and that group still exists. It's much degraded. It's not the force that it used to be. And of course, in that space, in the in the space of the war in Syria, we've seen a group like IS being able to emerge and get a lot stronger. But this is going to be a very long campaign. And what it's going to take is a multi-pronged approach, and we've seen that from President Barack Obama. He's trying to build a very broad-based coalition, including Arab countries. He's looking at cutting off funding, and of course the UN resolution was particularly about foreign fighters, restricting the flow of funding to them, restricting the movement of foreign fighters. And it's going to take these measures plus the use of force in a multi-pronged strategy to actually achieve some major effect on Islamic State.
There has been some comment about why Turkey hasn't got involved. What do you make of it?
Well, Turkey's government in recent years has become much more conservative, moved much more towards a conservative Islamic approach to its politics. And we've seen the arrest of a number of generals, a sort of change in the political landscape over there. And so I think that's having some impact on their approach, their very cautious approach. They are, of course, a member of NATO, which is pulling them in another direction. But they also share a land border with Syria. So they're moving, I think, very cautiously and very carefully, given the domestic political circumstances and also their geographical relationship and closeness to Syria.
What do you think about any suggestion that they might even be funding some of these IS militants?
There's been a number of reports that that funding has been coming across the border, that support was being provided and even sanctuaries being provided to Islamic State on the border region there. That's been clamped down upon by the Turkish government in recent weeks. And there seems to be a reorientation, but a number of states in the region were funding these different terrorist groups. It's a very complex mix of strategic circumstances in the region. And of course, many of these regimes are not so happy with Bashar al-Assad's regime and looking to overthrow that. And there's the tensions, of course, between the Sunni and Shia groups in the region as well. And all that's playing into this big mixing and melting pot that has become the civil war in Syria. So it's a very difficult situation. It's going to take a lot of careful balancing and careful manoeuvre, both in terms of military manoeuvre and military strikes, as well as the diplomatic space as well.
Peter, I'd like to get your thoughts on combat troops. Let's have a listen to what Tony Abbott had to say too at the Security Council.
We have no intention at this point of seeking to enter into combat operations in Syria. We have no intention of independent combat operations on the ground in Iraq. We are prepared to be helpful. We are more than prepared to do what we can to assist a broad international coalition disrupt and degrade ISIL's activities, but our intention is to do so inside Iraq.
Peter, Tony Abbott has said that Barack Obama has said it. Is it possible to, in any way, win this conflict without ground troops?
No, it's not. But what the coalition that the United States is trying to pull together is using ground troops from the region. The Iraqi forces, the Peshmerga forces, and of course they're talking about and will have put forward provisions here in the United States to arm and train the Free Syrian Army, the more moderate groups within inside Syria. So what they're looking at is using their own advantage, particularly in terms of air power, to strike against Islamic State, and then enable the ground forces from those states that are directly involved to provide the ground force to push Islamic State back out. Now, this is going to take a long period of time. What we're in here is a very early part of phase 1 of operations. By the time it takes to arm and retrain some of these groups, of course the Iraqi army, elements of the Iraqi army did not perform well initially against the Islamic State, so it's going to take time to reform, retrain and get those groups to move back into these different regions after they've been degraded by the Allied airstrikes. But of course the other difficulty we have here is that these ground forces that need to go into this, it's a very complex situation for them. They need to have the will and the need and the desire to do that. And of course there's mixed feelings in the region and mixed allegiances in the region.
Yep.
And of course they're doing this because one of the reasons they're trying to enable these forces is because I think at this stage the injection of large numbers of US or Western ground forces would actually complicate the situation even more.
Really nice to get your insights. Thanks for your time, Peter.